So, good day, everyone. I am Dulangon, and I am tasked to discuss the fifth topic for our subject, and that is about the nature of language acquisition. This is actually my second time recording this. The first time I recorded, it's 31 minutes. If you're interested to watch that, then you can view the video. I'll send link. And I am Andrea Meiji Dulangon, by the way. Now, for this discussion, I am tasked to discuss these three topics. First, we have second language acquisition, bilingualism, and then code switching. So we'll start with the discussion of second language acquisition by David Noonan. David Noonan is the main author that I use in discussing this topic. So for according to Noonan, second language acquisition refers to the processes rather through which someone acquires one or more second or foreign language. When you have the L1 or the first language or the native language, and when you want to acquire a second language, then the process of SLA is going to happen. Now, to have an in-depth understanding about second language acquisition, we're going to discuss these five terms. So the study of second language acquisition is divided into two eras: the behaviorist approach era and then the cognitive approach era. So we will go with the behaviorist approach. According to the behaviorists, or according to behaviorism in general, learning a language or acquiring a language is just the same as learning a hobby. You have to observe the action and then try to imitate it. So that's why, uh, uh, because of behaviorism, contrastive analysis was born. Now, proponents of contrastive analysis argued that when L1 and L2, the L1 stands for first language, L2 stands for second language. So L1 and L2 rules are in conflict, errors are likely to occur, which are the result of interference between L1 and L2, and that is called the negative transfer. It's according to contrastive analysis. But when the rules are similar for both languages, positive transfer would occur and language learning would be facilitated. To better illustrate the difference between negative and positive transfer, we are going to use Korean and French as our L1, and then, of course, English as our L2. Now, the sample sentence is I would like a beer. I'd like a beer. In Korean, I'd like a beer is translated as 맥주를 주세요. And then in French, excuse me for this pronunciation, I'm not an expert in French, j'aimerais une bière. Now, this Korean to English or English to Korean is considered a negative transfer, and French to English and English to French is considered a positive transfer. Why is that? It's because of the sentence structure, the differences in the sentence structure. I would like a beer when translated into Korean, the arrangement of the words in Korean is like this. Mekju is beer, and this one is a suffix attached to the beer to identify if the following phrases would either be adjective phrase or verb phrase. In this case, it's verb phrase. Now, as you can, there is an apparent evidence between the sentence structure in English and in Korean. In English, the usual arrangement is that the subject comes first and then the verb and then the object. But in Korean, the object comes first, followed by the subject and then the verb phrase, which makes it like a negative transfer. But in French, this one, when we dissect it into English, it's just the same English, the same sentence structure. J'aimerais means I'd like, une means and then bière means beer. So it's because French and English are just of the same roots. Now, French has its roots in Latin language with English undertones, and English has its German roots, but with French undertones. So basically, they have the same language transfer. That's why positive transfer happens. Now, uh, however, the theory of behaviorism was debunked when there is a major shift that happened in the 1960s, and cognitivism was founded. Now, they have been studying uh, second language acquisition in a different light. So, in this case, in behaviorism, errors are seen in like a negative transfer. But in cognitive approach, errors were seen not as evidence of pathology on the part of learners, but as a normal and healthy part of learning process. Now, there are three findings that these cognitivists have found out. First is that learners made errors that were not predicted by CAR contrastive analysis. Second, the errors that learners made were systematic rather, systematic rather than random. They're not random. These errors are made systematically. That's the second observation. And the third, learners appeared to move through a series of stages as they develop competence in the target language. And these stages are what we call the five phases of SLA. So, what are the five phases of SLA? We have silent or receptive phase, early production phase, speech emergence or production phase, intermediate fluency phase, and of course continued language development or fluency phase. Now, silent or receptive phase. In this first stage, second language learners dedicate time to learning vocabulary of the new language. They may also practice saying new terms. In phase 2 or early production, this second phase involves the second language user beginning to collect new words. During this time, they may also start to say some terms and may even begin forming short phrases of early word combination. That is the second phase. Now, the third phase is very interesting. That is the speech emergence or production. Now, by the time the second language learners enter into the third phase, they have collected several thousand words. And this is an exciting phase, as what I've mentioned, as they begin to communicate by combining these learned words into short phrases and sentences. So what they learn from the vocabulary now, they're connecting it to creating short phrases and sentences. Now there is truly now this their second language is truly becoming connected. The vocabulary and then the creation of the short terms and sentences. So there's a connection now. Now, the fourth phase or intermediate fluency phase is said to occur when speakers begin communicating in complex sentences. That is when there is now the use of conjunction to collect connect independent clauses from dependent clauses. There is a use of appropriate conjunction. Now, this is a critical stage for allowing even more connected language and true conversations to emerge. Second language at this time, again, reflecting the significant process has been made. And then phase 5 is the continued language development or fluency. This stage may last for an extended time, a long period of time, because here in second language learners will continue to develop their new language and to achieve accuracy with increasing complexity and with social pragmatics, meaning not only that the learner is now capable of eloquently speaking the language, but he or she knows when, how, or where to use the language. Social pragmatics. So that ends our topic for second language acquisition. Now we will proceed with bilingualism by Agnes Lam. Like David Noonan, Agnes Lam is the main author I used to discuss this topic. Now, according to Lam, Lam defined bilingualism as the phenomenon of competence and communication in two languages. Of course, by this prefix means two. So if you're able to speak two languages, then you're considered a bilingual. Now, how do we explain bilingualism how does bilingualism happen, or when do we consider that this person is considered a bilingual? Now, we have two major types of bilingualism that will eventually explain how can we consider a person a bilingual. So first we have simultaneous bilingualism. Now, simultaneous bilingualism refers to the acquisition of two languages at the same time. And a successive bilingual refers to a child who has partially acquired a first language and then learns a second language early in childhood. As you can see in the explanation, these are just the same, the acquisition of two languages. So what makes it different? When we say simultaneous bilingualism, two languages are learned at the same time before the age of 3. Okay, so when a child learns first language at the age of 1 and then learns the second language at the age of 2, then that child is considered a simultaneous bilingual. But if a child learns the first language at the age of 1 and then learns the second language at the age of 8, 9, or 10, then that child is considered a successive bilingual. That's what. So basically, the principle of second language acquisition is applied here. So you have the L1 and then you want to acquire L2. Aside from simultaneous and successive bilingualism, we also have other types of bilingualism. We have balanced bilingualism, complementary bilingualism, receptive bilingualism, transitional bilingualism, biscripturalism, and bidialectalism. Now, bilingualism means that a balanced bilingual is someone who is equally good at both languages. That's a balanced bilingual. Now, complementary bilingual is someone who can only function in one language in a few domains while communicating in another language in other domains. So, for example, at work, when you're an English teacher, you're only allowed to speak English when you're working, and then you speak Bisaya when you are at home, so that you are a complementary bilingual. We also have receptive bilingualism. Now, a receptive bilingualism is the ability of a learner to comprehend two languages but can speak and write only one of them. A very good example of this is Jisoo of Blackpink. Now, the three other bandmates can speak are considered balanced bilinguals because they can speak English and Korean well or eloquently, but Jisoo can understand Korean and English but can only speak in Korean. So Jisoo is a receptive bilingual. Now we also have transitional bilingualism. Now, transitional bilingualism explains that non dominant language is used as a medium of instruction for a period but is not eventually valued as a target language. For example, if you're a Filipino major, so in general education subjects, of course, you have English, but it's only used there because it's not valued really as a target language. So it's considered a non dominant language in that case. Then you also have biscripturalism and bidialectalism. Now, biscripturalism refers to the ability to read one more than one script of the same language. For example, Chinese language, they have the modern Chinese script and then the traditional Chinese script. So if you're able to read both of them, then you are considered a biscriptural list. Yes. Next, we also have bidialectalism. By the term itself, self explanatory, it means that you're able to speak two dialects. It's a common thing here in the Philippines when you can speak Hiligaynon, or you can speak the Maguindanao language, or you can speak in Bisaya, or you can speak in Tagalog, you can speak in Bicolano. So those you are considered it's considered bidialectalism. So I think that ends our topic for bilingualism. Now we will proceed with code switching by second Essen. Now, according to Essen, code switching is when speaker alternates between two or more languages, or not only languages, but dialects and or other varieties of language in just one conversation. In a discourse, when you speak in Bisaya and then you speak in English and then you speak in Bisaya and then you speak in English again, in just one conversation, then that is considered code switching. Now, to better understand code switching, we have to also first differentiate it from other terms. And those terms are code mixing and pigeon language. What's the difference of code switching to code mixing? Code switching is something speakers do intentionally because they want to express themselves with a personal style or flavor in order to fit into the people or the listeners that he or she is talking to. But code mixing is something speakers might do unintentionally simply because they don't know the correct word or phrase. So for example, you are speaking, you cannot remember, or there is no English equivalent to a Tagalog word, then you speak in Tagalog. So that's code mixing, not code switching. Code switching is done intentionally, and code mixing is done unintentionally. Now, there is also the difference between, do not get confused with code switching and pidgin language as well, because code switching generally occurs when both speakers are fluent in both languages. So if I'm fluent in Filipino and English, and I'm talking to someone who's also fluent in Filipino and English, and then we code switch most of the time, then it's code switching. But in pidgin language, this is more like a third dialect that evolves when speakers do not share a common language. So, usually in Pidgin, a speaker draws from two or more languages, but vocabulary and grammar are simplified and reduced. So, for example, I'm good at speaking in English, and then the friend I'm talking to can only speak Chinese. So, when I want to speak to this friend, I have to make sure that the grammar and the vocabulary that I'm using in English is just simple to be understood by my Chinese friend. So that is pidgin language, like a third vocabulary or a third language that you use if you do not have like a common language that you speak. So that's the difference between code switching and pidgin language. Now, we have three types of code switching. We have intersentential, intrasentential, and extrasentential. Now, in intersentential code switching, the language switch is done at sentence boundaries, words or phrases at the beginning or end of the sentence. This type is seen most often in fluent bilingual speakers. For example, if you're going to be late next time, wag ka na lang pupunta. So, the switch is done not in the middle of the sentence but at the end. So you speak in fluent English and then you code switch and you speak in Tagalog. So that is intersentential. When we say intrasentential, the switching is done in the middle. Okay? For example, gusto kong mag-buy nung strawberry na cookies. Gusto ko rin mag-sleep na ngayon kasi I'm tired na. So, gusto ko rin mag-sleep na ngayon. So, the code switching is done in the middle of the sentence. The sleep. Gusto ko rin mag-sleep ngayon na. So it's in the middle. So it's called intrasentential. And then you also have the third one, which is called extrasentential. This is switching of either a single word or a tag phrase, or both, from one language to another. This type is common in intrasentential switches. These are expressions that are in either of the language that you speak, and then you try to switch it in the middle. So sometimes it's confused with intersentential, but you have to remember that this is a single word or a tag phrase only, like oh my god. Okay, so that is the difference between these three types of code switching. Then of course we have to identify what is the reason why speakers use code switch. Why do we code switch? What's the reason behind it? So aside from SN, which is the main author that I used for this topic, I also researched for other reasons and I found Thompson's reasons. So for SN, he has three reasons. First, to fulfill a need, to express solidarity, and to exclude others. To fulfill a need, that's very general, but it means that in order for you to express yourself, in order for you to get what you want or to do what you want, in order for you to fill a need that you wanted to do, then you can code switch. Then next is to express solidarity. If you want to fit in, um, I will give you an example later in Thompson's situation. So if you want to feel like you fit in, you belong to the people that you're talking with, then you code switch with the language that they're using if you're fluent at that as well. So for example, if you're with your friends who can speak English and Tagalog, then we code switch in order for us to feel like we belong in the group or in the conversation. And then the third is to exclude others. In order for, if you have like other people listening, you use other language, you code switch because you don't want them to know what you're talking about, so you exclude them. Okay, then you also have Thompson's reason. First, we have our lizard brain takes over. We want to fit in and it helps us convey a thought. So our a good example for this, to explain all three of this, is the example given by Thompson about a Japanese woman who lived in US her whole life, and when she was like an adult, she visited Japan and visited a horror house. So while she was in Japan, of course, in order for you to express solidarity and if you want to fit in, then you have to speak in Japanese. She can speak in Japanese, by the way. But then, when she is in the height of her emotions, when she was faced with the fight or flight situation, height of the emotion, the super fear when you are in the horror house, she began talking in instincts. So she talked in English. So that's why our lizard brain or our instincts takes over in that case, the height of emotion. So that's why we code switch. It's inevitable, especially like if you are really nervous, you don't know what to you don't know what to talk, or you suddenly forgot about everything, mental block and all that. Our lizard brain takes over. So you unintentionally code switch. And then we want to fit in and explain that. So when you're in Japan, even if you live in US, if you can speak in Japanese, you have to fit in and you speak in Japanese. And then it also helps us convey a thought properly, because what if the person that you're talking to just is just like you, not very good at both languages, but considered a bilingual. So in order for you to express yourself completely and appropriately and properly, you code switch. So code switching in general isn't exactly a bad thing, but it can be a challenge because there are students or there are learners who code switch most of the time. So that ends my topic. I hope you've learned something. And if you have any questions, you can always email me or contact me in the contact information placed on the screen. Thank you so much for listening and peace out.